It wasn't a scream. It was a slow, agonizing implosion, a dying star fading into the black hole of the soul. Some learn to plaster smiles on their faces, a desperate camouflage against a world that can't bear to see the cracks. They become masters of composure, architects of ice, fortresses of independence, concealing a story that whispers of a pain beyond imagining. Carl Jung warned us that unacknowledged pain burrows deep, mutating into insidious behavior, a phantom limb twitching in the dark. And the most heartbreaking truth? Almost no one perceives it. They merely pass judgment, oblivious to the silent battle raging within. Prepare yourself, because in the next few minutes, you're about to unravel the 13 hidden traits that define those who have endured more than their fair share, those who navigate the world on a different frequency, sometimes estranged even from their own selves. More importantly, you'll discover how to transmute this voiceless agony into conscious awareness, into empowered choice, into profound and lasting healing. So, stay with me, journey with me until the very last second, because this could shatter your existing perceptions of yourself and rewrite the narrative of how you perceive those closest to your heart. There are scars unseen, etched not upon the skin, but in the averted gaze, the agonizingly slow dance of trust, the sudden desperate urge to vanish even amidst a throng of faces. Wounds that leave no visible trace, yet irrevocably mold the inner landscape. Silently, stealthily, they redefine a person's very being. Old pain doesn't announce its arrival with fanfare. It insinuates itself into the very fabric of existence, a permanent resident in the house of the soul. It manifests as a suffocating silence where vibrant words should bloom, a calcified stiffness where once an open heart dared to venture. Sometimes the person loses all conscious memory of the burdens they carry. They simply exist in a perpetual state of exhaustion, where every task demands an exorbitant price, where life inexplicably feels crushing, impossibly heavy. Carl Jung spoke of trauma as a psychic wound that festers, bleeding internally when ignored. But he also illuminated its potential to become a sacred passage, a catalyst not for forgetting the agony, but for transforming the relentless throbbing into something transcendent. When pain is truly, deeply, authentically heard, it doesn't become a life sentence. It metamorphosizes into illuminating awareness. The tragedy is that almost no one equips us with the tools to truly listen to pain. The world clamors for relentless performance, not mindful introspection. And so those who have suffered excessively learn to survive, to adapt, to cope. They painstakingly construct elaborate masks, devise emotional detours, seek refuge in the shadows, and go on living, sometimes even forcing a smile. But something within them remains perpetually vigilant, poised for battle, as if any gentle touch could rip open wounds that barely manage to scab over. You might recognize yourself shimmering within the reflection of some of these traits, or perhaps a loved one will suddenly emerge into sharper focus. Regardless, our mission here isn't to analyze anyone under a harsh, unforgiving light. It's to embrace with a deeper well of empathy, with heightened presence, and most importantly, with a profound reduction in crippling guilt, because every behavior, however baffling, is a chapter ripped from a larger story. No trait materializes from thin air, devoid of context. So, if at any point during this exploration you feel a constriction in your throat, a lump rising like a trapped sob, or the undeniable urge to draw a deeper breath, don't be alarmed. It's merely your soul recognizing a fragmented piece of itself, a long-lost mirror reflecting your own forgotten face. And that, as deceptively simple as it may seem, is already a monumental leap forward. Some souls learn early on that dependence is a perilous trap, that vocalizing needs invites ridicule, that relying on another human being can culminate in soul-crushing humiliation or agonizing abandonment. And so, as a primal survival response, the psyche engineers a coping mechanism. The person metamorphosizes into their own everything, indomitable, decisive, unbreakable, but inwardly depleted, running on fumes. Carl Jung illuminated the concept of the false self, the edifice the ego erects to shield itself when authentic self-expression becomes a life-threatening risk. It is a carefully constructed operational mode that offers a semblance of protection, but simultaneously imprisons the soul in isolation. The person becomes accustomed to bearing every burden in solitude, and the world unwittingly begins to believe the illusion that they are indeed capable of handling it all. But no one is meant to shoulder the entirety of existence all the time. That's why the primary trait that defines those who have endured too much is the formidable armor of hyperindependence. It is not a badge of maturity, but rather a weathered scar, a testament to battles fought and lost. It may project an aura of impressive strength from afar, but it weighs heavy as lead against the heart. The person vehemently refuses to betray their pain, yet inwardly writhes in agony. They suppress the plea for comfort, though their soul desperately craves it. They have simply forgotten how to ask, or perhaps they are paralyzed by shame, or maybe they can't even conjure the memory of trusting without the omnipresent specter of fear. This calcified rigidity permeates every facet of their existence. Relationships, friendships, professional endeavors. Every interaction becomes a meticulously crafted performance. Everything is subjected to the iron fist of self-control. But there is a steep price to be paid. The chest constricts, suffocating the breath. A gentle touch becomes an assault. Rest transforms into a perceived weakness. And even when surrounded by a sea of faces, the person remains stranded in the desolate wasteland of inner solitude. Because hyperindependence is not freedom. It's a prison constructed with an internal lock. Those who dwell within its walls don't seek to be a burden. They yearn to ensure they will never again be left dangling precariously on the precipice of heartbreak. But deep down, it is simply another elaborate strategy for remaining silently, invisibly wounded. The second pervasive trait exhibited by those who have weathered too many storms is excessive empathy. At first glance, it appears to be an unadulterated virtue, and in many cases, it undoubtedly is. However, when empathy transmutes into a survival mechanism, it ceases to be merely a benevolent quality and morphs into a strategic coping maneuver. Some souls, even in the tender years of childhood, learn to meticulously scan every room as if they were desperately searching for a bomb shelter. They can sense, almost palpably, when a storm is brewing, when something is about to unravel. They meticulously dissect the subtle nuances of tone, the fleeting glances, the pregnant silences. They cultivate such acute sensitivity that without conscious awareness, they begin to feel for others before they even possess the capacity to articulate what they feel for themselves. This overwhelming empathy does not originate from a place of lightness and joy. It is born from necessity, from the primal fear of becoming the target of an emotionally volatile father, from the relentless effort to anticipate the next explosive outburst from a mercurial mother, from the crushing burden of maintaining peace within the home, even if that peace exacts the ultimate cost, their own precious childhood. Jung termed projection this unconscious displacement, this act of attributing to others aspects of ourselves that we haven't yet dared to confront within our own being. And this is frequently what transpires with those who feel so deeply for others. They are unknowingly striving to nurture in others the pain they haven't yet acknowledged within themselves. The person metamorphoses into the steadfast source of support, the trusted confidant, the ever-present beacon of hope. But concealed beneath this facade of selfless giving lies a profound and debilitating exhaustion, because those who dedicate themselves to feeling for everyone, all the time, almost invariably neglect the most crucial person of all, themselves. Excessive empathy may appear noble, and at times it genuinely is. But it can also serve as a form of escapism, a strategic maneuver to avoid plunging into the murky depths of one's own agonizing pain, a means of existing vicariously through the experiences of others. Because existing solely for oneself has become unbearably heavy. Even worse, this form of empathy can spawn profoundly unbalanced relationships, those where one party relentlessly gives while the other insatiably takes, where listening to the other becomes a convenient excuse to perpetually silence one's own inner voice. And incrementally, that exquisitely refined sensitivity curdles into overwhelming overload. Individuals who bear this burden frequently feel invisible unless they are actively providing assistance. And that is the clearest indication that empathy in this context has ceased to be an expression of love and has transmuted into a desperate defense mechanism. Deep down, all this heightened emotional sensitivity stems from a specific origin. Someone, in the long-ago past, was compelled to anticipate emotions in order to survive. But now that necessity no longer exists. And perhaps the most profoundly empathetic act of all is to finally redirect that unwavering attentiveness inward. Some love with a hesitant, tentative hand, offering only a fraction of their heart, not because they are incapable of deep feeling. On the contrary, they feel with an intensity that can be overwhelming, but because they reflexively hold back, constructing elaborate barriers. They observe, dissecting every nuance, analyzing every detail, before even contemplating the possibility of fully opening their heart. And even when they begin to extend a fragile tendril of trust, they perpetually safeguard a hidden compartment of themselves, a sanctuary untouched by any other soul, a place perpetually shrouded in doubt. It's as if something within them incessantly whispers, "Proceed with extreme caution." This could inflict agonizing pain once again. And in truth, it genuinely could. For someone who was shattered at the precise point where they most desperately needed safety and security, the act of opening up has ceased to be a simple, effortless gesture. The echoes of past abandonment reverberate louder than the whispered promises of present affection. Love extends its hand, but fear clings to its coattails. This is the third hallmark of those who have suffered excessively. A profound and debilitating fear of authentic, intimate relationships. Intimacy serves as a trigger, setting off ancient alarm bells, activating deeply ingrained survival mechanisms. This is not histrionics. It is the unconscious mind recognizing patterns that have left indelible scars, even if the conscious mind cannot fully articulate the origin of the intense reaction. Jung elucidated how unconscious complexes can hijack our conscious awareness. In the context of a relationship, this manifests as disproportionate overreactions, seemingly irrational waves of jealousy, sudden and inexplicable withdrawals. But lurking beneath the surface, there is almost invariably an inner child who vividly remembers the excruciating pain of extending trust, only to be cruelly abandoned, left to navigate the darkness alone. On the surface, this person may project an aura of confidence, sometimes even bordering on self-sufficiency. They may utter pronouncements such as, "I don't require anyone," or "I am far better off in solitude." But concealed within, there resides a profound longing that has been painstakingly buried beneath layers of protective armor. And each time someone ventures too close, that longing surfaces, cleverly disguised as crippling fear, simmering irritability, oppressive control, or impenetrable silence. Authentic relationships demand full, unadulterated presence, the willingness to expose one's true self, vulnerabilities, and all. But for someone who has been repeatedly wounded, the act of being fully present feels excruciatingly exposed, like standing naked in a howling blizzard. And thus, love transmutes into a treacherous battlefield, not a sanctuary for respite and renewal. If you find yourself loving someone who carries this burden, you will require the patience of a saint, the unwavering commitment of a lighthouse in a storm. And if you recognize yourself reflected in these words, you will require immense courage, not to recklessly plunge headfirst into the unknown, but to embrace the profound realization that perhaps, just perhaps, the present moment does not necessarily have to be an automatic, agonizing replay of the past. Not all love inflicts pain. Not every gesture of approach is a cleverly disguised act of abandonment. Sometimes it is simply someone striving to stay, offering their unwavering presence as a beacon in the darkness. How many times have you heard the phrase, "You are so strong," resonating in your ears? And each time you offer a smile, a murmur of thanks, a subtle nod. But no one bears witness to the solitary tears that stain your pillow each night, the silent sobs that shake your body until dawn. Some souls have been thrust into the role of symbols of strength because they were afforded no other viable alternative. When the foundation of their world crumbled prematurely, They were left with two stark choices: to hoist the collapsing roof upon their own shoulders, or to be crushed beneath its weight. And so, the body learns to rise each day, even when every fiber of being yearns to succumb to gravity, to dissolve into the shadows, to simply cease to exist. The fourth defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms is this: the meticulously constructed persona of the unshakable strong person who crumbles in agonizing solitude. The outward appearance is one of serene balance, a calm facade masking an inner turmoil. The voice is firm, unwavering. The gaze is steady, unwavering. But concealed beneath this carefully crafted exterior is an exhaustion that evades the scrutiny of prying eyes. Because to betray any hint of weariness is to commit the unpardonable sin of perceived weakness. And to exhibit genuine pain is simply not an option. Jung referred to this persona as the social mask we all don, the face we present to the world. But when the weight of inner pain becomes unbearable, that mask ceases to be a conscious choice and metamorphoses into a permanent shield, an impenetrable barrier. The person molds themselves into the embodiment of what the world demands them to be, painstakingly sculpting their identity to mirror external expectations, and gradually loses touch with the authenticity of their own feelings. The inherent risk is that all this cultivated strength solidifies into a silent prison, confining the soul in perpetual isolation. No one extends a hand to inquire if you require assistance, because everyone labors under the comforting illusion that you possess everything under impeccable control. But no one can shoulder the entirety of existence all the time. No one should be burdened with such an impossible task. What superficially resembles stability is frequently nothing more than carefully managed containment, a desperate attempt to prevent the dam from bursting. What projects as unwavering self-control is, in reality, a manifestation of the primal fear of publicly unraveling, of fracturing before the unforgiving gaze of others. And thus life metamorphoses into a relentless balancing act, meticulously holding everything together on the exterior while slowly, irrevocably fracturing on the interior. And when the inevitable breakdown arrives, it unfurls in solitary confinement, in the sanctuary of the shower, upon the tear-stained pillow, during the desolate commute home. No one bears witness. No one suspects the simmering chaos beneath the composed surface, because the performance was so flawlessly executed, the facade so convincingly maintained. It scarcely seems plausible that anything could be amiss, but something is undeniably wrong. The burden has been too heavy for too long, crushing the soul beneath its relentless weight. Authentic strength does not reside in the illusion of perpetual invincibility, in the denial of human frailty. It resides in the ability to vulnerably confess, honestly, today is excruciating, and to extend trust to another soul, believing that they will listen without judgment, without unsolicited advice, without the suffocating weight of imposed pressure. To simply listen. Perhaps on that pivotal day, the armor will begin to loosen, the carefully constructed barriers will begin to crumble, allowing the wounded soul to breathe again. The fifth defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms is sensory hypersensitivity. Loud noises feel overwhelming, assaulting the senses. Bright lights irritate, causing a visceral recoiling. Crowded environments drain, leaving one feeling depleted and hollow. The conscious mind desperately attempts to maintain control, but the body reacts first, an involuntary rebellion against the onslaught of stimuli. The heart races, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety. Breathing shallows, becoming ragged and uneven. The sudden, inexplicable urge to flee surges through the veins, a desperate plea for escape. This is not histrionics. It is not an exaggeration, a deliberate attempt to magnify the experience. It is the manifestation of a nervous system that has been meticulously trained to exist in a perpetual state of heightened alert, a hypervigilant sentinel guarding against perceived threats. Concealed beneath this exquisitely refined sensitivity lies a profound story. A childhood marred by danger that materialized without warning. A traumatic event that transmuted the world into a menacing landscape of perceived threats. A body that, for an extended period, was denied the solace of true relaxation. When emotional pain permeates the soul with unrelenting intensity, the body never truly forgets. It holds on to the memories, the sensations, the visceral responses. Jung posited that whatever remains unacknowledged by the conscious mind inevitably resurfaces as fate. In the context of long-dormant pain, it manifests as physical sensations, as somatic echoes of past traumas. The body becomes the eloquent voice of the soul, articulating what the conscious mind has not yet found the words to express. This heightened sensitivity enables the individual to perceive nuances that elude the awareness of others. A subtle undercurrent of aggression in a background noise, a faint odor that goes unnoticed by everyone else, a fleeting glance that lingers for half a second too long, feeling like a subtle form of judgment. It is akin to existing with every sensor perpetually activated, even when there is no tangible danger lurking. It is an exhausting, often bewildering experience, because the surrounding individuals struggle to comprehend why that particular place felt unsettling, why that specific gathering was overwhelming, why that seemingly innocuous conversation left the individual feeling utterly drained. But for the one who experiences this hypersensitivity, everything is a stimulus, assaulting the senses with relentless force. Everything impacts at full volume, with no buffer, no filter, no respite. This acutely refined sensitivity can be a precious gift when properly understood and harnessed. Many who possess this trait are profoundly intuitive, deeply perceptive, exquisitely attuned to the subtle energies of the world. But when it is rooted in past trauma, it metamorphoses into a crushing burden, a ball and chain shackling the soul. The body transforms into a silent battlefield, reacting viscerally to threats that the conscious mind has long since banished from memory, but that the soul continues to hold captive within its depths. Healing commences when we consciously acknowledge the profound impact of pain on the physical body. When we comprehend that physical discomfort is not an indication of weakness, but rather a visceral echo of past traumas, a somatic memory, and that what appears to be an exaggerated response to stimuli might simply be an ancient scream, desperately pleading to be heard, acknowledged, validated. Not every instance of physical discomfort is random, devoid of meaning. Sometimes it is merely the body speaking its truth, uttering, "That was once too much for me, and I am now desperately attempting to protect you from reliving that experience." The sixth defining trait of those who have endured too many storms is the relentless, almost obsessive need for control. And this is not because the individual is inherently bossy, inflexible, or controlling in the conventional sense of the term. It is because, at some pivotal juncture in their life, they were plunged into the chaotic abyss of overwhelming circumstances, and they learned through agonizing trial and error that if they fail to exert unwavering control over every facet of their existence, everything will inevitably crumble into ruin. Control metamorphoses into a desperate means of breathing, of maintaining a fragile semblance of order amidst the swirling chaos. Meticulously planning every step, relentlessly anticipating every potential outcome, triple-checking every minute detail. It is not an exercise in the acquisition of power. It is a desperate defense mechanism against the suffocating grip of fear. Fear of being caught off guard once again. Fear of reliving a past trauma that exacted an exorbitant toll on the soul. On the surface, it projects an image of impressive efficiency, impeccable organization, unwavering responsibility. But concealed within, there simmers a perpetual state of tension, a relentless undercurrent of anxiety. There is no respite, no true relaxation, because even when everything is ostensibly proceeding smoothly, the mind remains trapped in a perpetual loop of frantic calculations. What if something goes tragically awry? What if I have inadvertently overlooked something of critical importance? Carl Jung astutely observed, the ego incessantly strives to control precisely that which the unconscious mind vehemently resists confronting. And in this context, the obsessive need for control solidifies into an impenetrable barricade erected against the inherent unpredictability of life, against the suffocating feeling of abject helplessness that once consumed the soul and has never fully relinquished its grasp. Individuals ensnared in this relentless control mode struggle to relinquish their grip even momentarily. They harbor an aversion to delegating tasks, as they can only trust themselves to do things correctly. They vehemently resist accepting the unexpected, because to them, surprises are not merely inconvenient disruptions. They are perceived as emotional threats, capable of destabilizing the carefully constructed order. They disrupt more than meticulously planned routines. They shatter the very foundation of the psyche. Frequently, they remain oblivious to the extent to which they are trapped within this self-perpetuating mechanism. They simply exist in a perpetual state of exhaustion, feeling constantly overloaded, relentlessly fixing everything, even when no one has explicitly requested their intervention. And this relentless pursuit of control comes at a steep price. Relationships become fraught with tension, strained by the unrelenting pressure. Seemingly insignificant decisions balloon into monumental dilemmas, paralyzing the mind with indecision. The present moment is never sufficient, never fully appreciated, because the mind is perpetually 2 steps ahead, frantically attempting to predict every conceivable outcome, to preempt every potential threat. At its core, this obsession with control is not an indication of inherent strength or resilience. It is the indelible mark of a soul that once felt utterly powerless against the crushing weight of pain and is now desperately striving to compensate for that perceived deficiency. But life, that untamed, enigmatic force, cannot be tamed, cannot be constrained within the rigid confines of human control. It can only be authentically lived, experienced in all its messy, unpredictable glory. And living authentically demands a measure of trust, not blind, reckless abandon, but a delicate, tentative openness to possibility. The unwavering belief that perhaps, just perhaps, not everything needs to be meticulously controlled in order to ultimately unfold in a positive, meaningful way. Healing does not materialize from a sudden, wholesale abandonment of control. It emerges from the gradual realization, embraced in small, incremental steps, that it is indeed possible to exist, to thrive, without the suffocating fear that everything will inevitably collapse into ruin. Relinquishing control is akin to switching off the lights in a room where one has habitually slept with every lamp blazing, fueled by the primal fear of the lurking darkness. Initially, it is unsettling, disorienting, perhaps even terrifying. Then, gradually, it might transform into a sensation of profound and liberating rest. But genuine rest does not invariably manifest in the midst of clamorous noise, the presence of bustling crowds, or the superficiality of idle conversation. Sometimes true relief descends when everything grows still, when the external world ceases its relentless demands, its intrusive pressures, its unwelcome intrusions. That is the 7th defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms, a profound need for silence as a refuge, a sanctuary for the wounded soul. It is not isolation stemming from disdain for others. It is a deep-seated craving for personal space, for a deliberate pause amidst the relentless chaos, for dedicated time to simply hear the sound of one's own breath without being incessantly bombarded by external expectations, by the relentless demands of the world. Silence transforms into a shelter, a protective haven, a nurturing cocoon where the fractured soul attempts to reorganize itself, to piece together the shattered fragments, to mend the broken places. And this profound need for silence can be challenging for those who derive their energy from external stimulation, those who thrive on noise, incessant movement, and perpetual social engagement. Those individuals might find it perplexing, even unsettling, when someone actively seeks out a quiet corner, prefers a fleeting chat over an extended discourse, desires a lighter, less intrusive presence. But for those who have weathered tumultuous internal storms, silence is not synonymous with emptiness. It is a vital process of repair, a conscious act of self-preservation. Jung recognized the potent symbolic value of retreat, of deliberate withdrawal from the external world. He viewed this act of seeking solitude as a psychic process of death and rebirth, a necessary stage in the journey toward individuation. When everything feels overwhelming, when the senses are assaulted from every direction, the soul instinctively pulls back, retracting into itself, akin to someone shielding a raw and agonizing wound from the slightest touch. This is not an act of coldness or apathy, but rather a primal instinct for survival. And silence is not simply the absence of external sound. It is the deliberate absence of judgment, of relentless demands, of stifling masks. It is a sacred space where nothing requires explanation, where pain can simply exist, unburdened by the scrutiny of an audience, free from the suffocating pressure to heal at an accelerated pace. But over time, that silence, which initially served as a balm for the soul, can gradually transform into a formidable wall, an impenetrable barrier. What began as a necessary pause can solidify into a deeply ingrained pattern, and the inherent risk is that silence begins to equate to solitude, and solitude, in turn, leads to devastating forgetfulness, a fading from the minds and hearts of others. That is why this trait demands careful consideration, gentle awareness. Not everyone who retreats into silence is inherently okay, thriving in their solitude. Sometimes they are simply too weary, too depleted to continue striving to conform to a world that incessantly demands constant communication, that seems incapable of existing without perpetual noise. The optimal path lies in allowing that silence to unfold without imposing guilt, without feeling compelled to offer constant explanations, but also in remaining cognizant of the critical moment to crack the door open, to cautiously extend an invitation to another soul, someone who will offer unwavering listening, someone who will simply remain present, steadfast, and true. Because silence can be a comforting home, but it also requires a door, a potential avenue for re-entry into the world, a chance to reconnect with the warmth of human connection. Now, have you ever paused to consider how uttering the seemingly simple phrase, "I trust you," can feel deceptively straightforward, yet for someone who has been repeatedly betrayed while extending trust, those words carry an almost unbearable weight, like leaden stones sinking in the stomach? The heartfelt gesture becomes trapped in the throat, unable to fully emerge. The raw emotion seizes control of the entire body, rendering it rigid and unresponsive. Not because the genuine feeling is absent, but because the perceived risk feels overwhelmingly vast, impossibly insurmountable. The eighth defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms is a heart that is excessively guarded, perpetually locked down, meticulously protected by every available means. And not out of malice, inherent pride, or underlying indifference, but because the last time it dared to venture into the light, to beat freely and openly, it was subjected to excruciating pain, a wound that reverberates through the ages. The ego learns to shield itself, to construct invisible filters, to meticulously evaluate every external stimulus before granting credence to its veracity. It engages in relentless doubt before ultimately surrendering, however reluctantly. It scrutinizes gestures, dissects nuances of tone, meticulously analyzes even the subtle variations in the time elapsed between successive messages. Love arrives, tentatively extending its hand, but it must navigate a brutal gauntlet of screening processes before being deemed worthy of acceptance. And this is an exhausting endeavor, both for the one who feels the incessant need to protect themselves and for the one who is striving to offer their love and affection, because affection never flows freely, never unfolds with effortless grace. There is always a concealed weight, a pervasive tension, an unspoken question simmering beneath the surface. Can I truly, completely, irrevocably trust this person? The soul exists in a perpetual state of guarded vigilance, akin to someone sleeping with one eye perpetually open, scanning for potential threats. Jung illuminated the critical distinction between living from a place of pervasive fear and living from a place of unwavering trust. And here, in this context, fear has become the distorting lens through which the individual perceives the world. The person interprets every external event through the prism of past pain, through the indelible memory of past betrayals. And even when everything is ostensibly proceeding smoothly, when no tangible danger is present, something within them incessantly whispers, "Remain vigilant. This could change at any moment. Prepare for the inevitable descent into chaos." It is as if the unconscious mind remains oblivious to the passage of time, trapped in a perpetual loop, reacting as if the original threat were still imminently present. Even when it is not, even when the other person is demonstrably kind, genuinely present, and exquisitely gentle, persistent distrust remains a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, a strategy for averting future pain. But this unwavering distrust ultimately ends up blocking the genuine, unadulterated experience of authentic love. Because there can be no profound connection, no soul-to-soul intimacy, without some measure of surrender, without embracing the inherent risk of vulnerability, without consciously opening the door to allow another soul to enter the sacred space of one's inner world. And the most poignant irony of all, those who guard their hearts most fiercely are typically the very individuals who harbor the deepest yearning to love and to be loved in return, to experience the transformative power of profound connection. They simply cannot bear the thought of reliving the agony of past betrayals, of enduring the soul-crushing pain of abandonment. They simply strive to protect themselves from further harm. But overprotecting one's heart can also inflict profound damage, can calcify the soul, preventing it from experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions, both joyous and sorrowful. The key might lie in proceeding with measured caution, in extending tentative trust in small incremental doses, meticulously observing the unfolding events, assessing the safety of the terrain. Taking a single, deliberate step forward, not flinging the doors of the heart wide open in a reckless act of surrender, but also actively resisting the impulse to flee in abject terror. Because perhaps, just perhaps this time, love has not arrived with the intention of inflicting pain. It has come to stay, to offer unwavering support, to provide a safe haven for the wounded soul. The ninth defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms, a sense of justice acutely sharpened by the agonizing experience of pain. It does not originate from academic texts or lofty philosophical pronouncements. It stems from the first-hand, visceral experience of injustice, the soul-crushing impact of betrayal, the agonizing silencing of one's authentic voice, the suffocating helplessness of being deeply wounded while no one intervened to offer protection. A soul that has been crushed beneath the weight of injustice learns to detect its subtle presence from afar, to recognize its insidious scent lingering in the air, and will no longer passively tolerate its corrosive influence. The slightest spark of disrespect sets off an ancient alarm bell, triggering a cascade of memories and emotions. And even when everything appears ostensibly calm, the reaction manifests with an intensity that stems not only from a desire for self-defense, but also from the potent power of past memories, from the echoes of past injustices reverberating in the soul. Jung understood that emotional complexes are activated when present-day events touch upon the same raw wounds that were inflicted in the past. And this acutely heightened sense of justice is undoubtedly one of those deep, festering wounds. It is a hallmark of someone who carries the indelible scar of having been silenced and now vehemently refuses to remain quiet, to swallow their voice, to passively endure injustice. Sometimes those who surround this individual struggle to comprehend their intense reactions. They perceive them as overreacting, being unnecessarily dramatic, acting impulsively, but they fail to grasp the underlying context, the simmering pain beneath the surface. It is not histrionics, it is the psyche asserting, "Not this time. This time I will not passively endure it. This time I will not swallow the injustice." This ethical sensitivity frequently manifests early in life. Children who witnessed wrongs being committed and felt powerless to intervene, teenagers who rebelled against absurd and oppressive rules, adults who passionately championed causes with the fervor of someone attempting to rescue their own wounded inner child. The archetypal figure activated here is the moral warrior, the individual who fights fiercely for coherence, for unwavering respect, for unyielding integrity, not striving for unattainable perfection, but rather defending the inherent dignity of all beings. And this fight, when tempered with balance and wisdom, is undeniably noble, a force for positive change in the world. But when guided solely by the unyielding grip of past pain, it can devolve into calcified rigidity or suffocating intolerance, blinding the individual to alternative perspectives. The challenge, then, lies in maintaining that acutely honed sense of justice without allowing it to transform into an impenetrable armor erected against the complexities of the world. In wielding the sword of righteousness with unwavering conviction, but also possessing the discernment to know when to lower it, when to listen with an open heart, when to extend compassion and embrace understanding. Because those who have been personally wounded by injustice intimately understand the profound pain it inflicts, the corrosive damage it leaves in its wake. And for that very reason, they possess the rare and invaluable opportunity to approach situations differently, to offer a presence that protects without resorting to punishment, that fights valiantly for justice without becoming irrevocably lost in the throes of endless conflict. Those who carry the sword of justice possess an insight that eludes many others. Pain possesses the power to sharpen perception, to refine one's ability to discern truth from falsehood, and not merely to identify blatant acts of injustice, but also to notice the subtle nuances that escape the conscious awareness of others, the unspoken suffering concealed beneath the surface. Those who possess this heightened perception are able to discern when someone is not genuinely okay, even when they are projecting a forced smile, to intuitively feel what remains unsaid, to comprehend what has never been explicitly shared, and to hold a safe and nurturing space without bombarding the other with intrusive questions. That is the 10th defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms, the extraordinary ability to perceive the invisible suffering within others. It is as if pain has meticulously tuned their senses, calibrating them to detect the faintest whispers of suffering. The soul becomes more acutely alert, more deeply empathetic, more profoundly open to sensing where sadness lies concealed, even when it is skillfully masked. And this is not some form of inexplicable magic, a supernatural gift bestowed upon a select few. It is the product of memory, of hard-won experience. Memory of having inhabited the very skin of the suffering individual, of having endured similar hardships, of having navigated the same treacherous terrain that is now only detectable through subtle signs. This type of perception cannot be taught in a classroom. It is either born within the soul, or more accurately, it is awakened in the aftermath of a profound fall, a shattering experience that shatters the illusion of invincibility. Those who have silently wept in the darkness possess the innate ability to listen to the subtle nuances of silence. Those who have experienced profound loneliness in the midst of a bustling crowd learn to recognize when someone else is trapped in that same desolate place. It is an almost instinctive recognition, a mirroring of shared experience. Jung posited that as we integrate our own past pain, we become increasingly equipped to recognize the collective pain that permeates the world around us. That is precisely what this trait represents. A form of heightened emotional radar that does not actively seek to be noticed or lauded, but rather quietly emerges when its unique capabilities are most desperately needed. And frequently, that silent presence, that unwavering support, makes all the difference in the world, offering a glimmer of hope in the darkest of nights. This sensitivity may project an aura of gentleness, but it carries a profound weight, a heavy responsibility, because seeing what remains invisible to others also implies a moral obligation to act, to offer support, to alleviate suffering whenever possible. And those who feel so deeply for others frequently neglect their own needs, their own well-being. They absorb the pain of those around them, internalizing their struggles. They care with unwavering intensity. They become deeply involved in the lives of others, and in the process, they often disappear, fading into the background, sacrificing their own needs for the sake of others. The key lies in cultivating balance, in learning to see and support others without sacrificing one's own well-being, in remaining present without dissolving into the other person's experience, in feeling with another without assuming the burden of carrying everything alone. This extraordinary ability to perceive the invisible is a precious gift, a powerful force for good in the world. But it also serves as a constant reminder of the fragility of the human spirit, of the pervasive nature of suffering. Pain, when processed with conscious awareness, can be transformed into a valuable tool, a profound presence, a gentle touch that does not intrude or violate, but rather supports and uplifts. And even when the world continues to rush forward at a frenetic pace, those who possess this trait inherently understand that the truth lies in the subtle details, in the precise way someone sits, in the deliberate pause between spoken words, in an "I'm fine" that lacks conviction, that fails to fully persuade. And only someone who has personally experienced profound pain can truly decipher the hidden meaning behind those subtle signs, can grasp the depth of the unspoken suffering. But seeing others so clearly comes at a significant cost, a draining of energy, a blurring of boundaries. While you are meticulously reading the subtle cues in other people's eyes, dissecting their gestures, scrutinizing their tone of voice, something within you whispers, what if, in the end, you are simply a burden, an unwelcome presence, an imposition on their lives? Have you ever caught yourself reflexively apologizing for something trivial, or even for nothing at all? Have you ever felt that simply by existing, by occupying space, you were already being too much, demanding too much attention, requiring too much effort? The 11th defining trait of those who have weathered too many storms is this: the deeply ingrained fear of being a burden on others, of being perceived as an unwelcome presence. It is a subtle, almost imperceptible feeling, but it is relentlessly persistent, a form of internalized shame for simply existing with all one's inherent needs, with one's accumulated hurts, with one's authentic desires. Those who carry this pervasive fear almost never openly discuss it, never explicitly articulate their anxieties, but it subtly manifests in every attempt to